As you start a business, you need to think about how you can position yourself so that you are taking on market rather than competitive risk. Here are 3 questions you can ask yourself to help figure this out. First, is it easy to find information about the market opportunity? When an entrepreneur says to me, there's a huge market and I've got the projections to prove it, it may well be that there's a competitor that has already scoped out that market, in which case they will be taking on competitive risk, competing against established rivals. If there's very little information, you don't know if there's a market for the problem that you want to solve, but there are no competitors. That's market risk. Number 2, is there an established competitor that has the incentive to co-opt your idea? The incentive being that by offering this product or service, the competitor can increase revenue and expand margins. The grocery store could have come to the football field, but it didn't because it didn't make financial sense. In other words, how likely is it that your idea will be co-opted or quashed, leaving you crushed? If your product or service involves doing what a well-capitalized player is already doing and requires their cooperation, or worse, could involve a game of chicken until you get squashed like a bug, that's competitive risk. Third, are you going after people that haven't historically been anyone's customers? These are people who would be customers but haven't been able to gain access to the product. As you're vetting your potential business ideas, eliminate the competitive risk whenever possible. This is a difference between a friends and family lemonade stand that earns a few dollars and one that makes multiples of that, because customers are truly thirsty for your product and you are the only one serving it up. The most successful entrepreneurs play to their distinctive strengths, or what they do uniquely well. The trouble with distinctive strengths is that they're easy to overlook because you do them reflexively well. As Malcolm Forbes said, we tend to undervalue what we are and overvalue what we aren't. Here then are a few clues for tapping into your strengths. The first is to ask, what makes you feel strong? Marcus Buckingham, author of Now Discover Your Strengths, frames it well. Our strengths clamor for our attention in the most basic way. Using them makes you feel strong. You feel invigorated, inquisitive, successful. Erin Newkirk, the founder of Red Stamp, for example, has built a business on what makes her feel strong, sending notes and cards to loved ones. A couple of other clues to your unique abilities. What do you think about when there's nothing you have to think about? And when are you exasperated? The frustration of genius is in believing if it's easy for you, it must be easy for everyone else. The second question is, what do others identify as your best skills? What do people endorse you for on LinkedIn, for example? Keep an ear open for those compliments you habitually dismiss. It's possible that you're discounting a strength that others value. Your biggest superpowers may not even be on your resume because you overlooked them. The third question is, do you have a confluence of skills? As you mine for your unique abilities, your distinctive skill may not be one skill, but an unusual intersection of ordinary proficiencies. In building a business, it's easy to identify the things you do reasonably well. You've likely worked very hard for these skills, and no doubt you'll use them. But to build a truly robust business, play to your distinctive strengths, what you do remarkably and uniquely well. As an aspiring entrepreneur, one of the questions you need to ask yourself is, do I have a business or a hobby? The word hobby comes from the word hobby horse, a fancy toy, hence the sometimes pejorative use of the word. Historically, if you did something just for fun, you were described as an amateur, which derives from the French word lover of. Whereas if you engaged in an activity for a reward, you were considered a professional. Over the last century, as we've had the resources to give our dreams more sway, especially in the developed world, more and more hobbyists are becoming experts, and there is more and more demand for a hobbyist's expertise. The first step in determining if your hobby is something you can do for fun and earn money is to gauge interest or demand. Are there people stopping you on the street asking about what you're wearing, downloading your do-it-yourself instructions, or watching you explain what you do on YouTube? That's a good sign. Once you've determined there's interest, the next step is to find out, are people willing to pay for what you do? The third thing to consider as you decide whether you have a business is to ask the IRS if you do, using the profit or 3 of 5 test. Have you earned money on this activity in the last 3 out of 5 years, including the current year? If you have, you are presumed to be spending money to make money or have a profit motive. The IRS's concern is that you are deducting indulgences as business expenses. From a tax perspective, this also applies to passion or social good projects, whether you're raising cancer awareness or trying to raise the self-esteem of teenagers. I learned this the hard way. I had spent a lot of money on the initiative Know Your Neighbor in order to help build community. A wonderful thing to do, said my accountant, but without having gone through the proper steps to become a nonprofit, this was a hobby. My expenses were not tax deductible. In addition to the 3 out of 5 test, you'll want to show proof that you are trying to make money. For example, do you have business cards, a well-maintained set of books, a separate business account, current business licenses, and/or marketing expenditures that would persuade an auditor that you really are in business? Now, more than ever, people can make a living doing what they love. So, if you're still looking for a business idea, why not start with what you've already invested considerable time and money on, your hobbies? You've got a business idea, you're confident there will be customers, but you don't know. It's time to find out. To do this as quickly and inexpensively as possible, I recommend the Minimum Viable Product, or MVP approach, popularized by Eric Ries, author of The Lean Startup. The MVP is the version of a product that allows you to collect the maximum amount of learning about customers with the least cost. It's an iterative process of idea generation, prototyping, presentation, data collection, analysis, and learning. Building an MVP is the opposite of the stealth approach used by many startups where they are developing products behind closed doors with little to no feedback. With this approach, you start working backwards by starting with a paying customer. If you're relying on patents, there may be challenges with releasing an early version of your product, but because patents tend to be issued for defensive reasons, the learning benefits typically outweigh the risks. Whether you have a physical product or service, there are a number of different ways to affordably prototype. First is with a physical product. For example, you can work with a 3D printing factory, build a low-cost prototype that you can put in the hands of potential customers. You may even want to post DIY instructions. If downloads far exceed expectations, the next opportunity for data collection is a Kickstarter campaign, asking customers to pre-fund a build. For handmade goods, Etsy is an ideal marketplace. If you're a service business, you may want to consider the concierge approach. The same approach applies for ideapreneurs or aspiring thought leaders. Rather than writing a full-length book, start with tweets, blogs, podcasts, or a quick video. As you do the work to provide customers with a product they want, remember that building a minimum viable product is an iterative process of generating ideas, prototyping, presenting, collecting and analyzing data, and learning. You'll eventually get the right product market fit, or you won't. Either way, you will have affordably determined if you have the makings of a viable business. You have a product or a service, you have your first customer. Now you need a plan for how you're going to make money. A business plan is a formal statement defining your business goals, the reasons you think they can be achieved, and how you're going to achieve them. There are several different types of business plans. The elevator pitch, a 30-second summary or teaser for potential investors, typically used at informal meetings. A pitch deck with an oral narrative, also to pique the interest of potential investors. There's also a detailed written proposal targeted at external stakeholders, such as when you're trying to secure a business loan. And an internal operational plan that includes detailed guidelines for how management plans to execute on its business idea. As you turn your idea into a business, it's important to think like a CEO. Creating a business plan can be an initial step in this transformational process. In writing this plan, there are a number of different resources available, such as Bill Salmon's How to Write a Great Business Plan. But for now, you want to just get started, and getting started starts with a simple checklist. For example, I want you to think about: what will you sell? What problem will you solve? What will you charge, and who will buy your product? How will people find out about you? How will you make the product or provide the service, and what will it cost? Do you have competitors? Why will customers prefer you? Or are you disrupting another company? Does this business play to your strengths? What are some obstacles or challenges you are going to face? And by when will you start? It can be that simple. You may at some point need to do a more in-depth and detailed business plan, especially if you need external funds, whether borrowing money or raising equity. But in the spirit of a minimum viable product, this is a good first iteration, one that you can use to vet your idea with trusted advisors. Be aware that your plan will change. In fact, if your plan isn't changing, you may not be learning enough about your product and potential customers. As stated in the module on finding your first customer, business is about idea generation, prototyping, data collection, analysis, and learning. The importance of the plan is far less about where you end up, but rather thinking through how you will get there. How you make money may change, but start with a plan. In order to have a successful business, it's important to determine the right price for your product. Price too high and your business stalls before it starts. Price too low, volume may be high right up until you go belly up. To get the price right, here are several considerations. Ask your target customers what they pay for a similar product or service. Do they buy online or prefer to buy at the store? Do they like a la carte or all-in-one pricing? What price ranges don't require outside approval? A manager if you're selling to a business or B2B, significant other if you're selling to individuals or B2C. Use this as a starting point. The next step is to benchmark against competitors. If your product is better than the competition, demonstrate it and charge more. Conversely, if your product has fewer features, acknowledge it and justify a lower price. Next, err on the side of pricing too high. You can always lower your prices, but once you have published prices, it's a lot more difficult to raise them. More often than you'd expect, entrepreneurs price their goods and especially services too low. If you don't have obvious competitors, you may want to experiment with prices or A/B test like Amazon does. One day a book will cost $19.99, another $14.99. Do this for several consecutive weeks and measure which price point generated the most revenue. If offering services anchor around value, meaning calculate how much value you could create for an individual, and then charge them 30 to 40% of that value with the expectation that they will earn 2.5 to 3 times their money. For example, if a customer believes that your product will give them $100 of value, then you should charge them $30 to $40. Also, be aware that payments promote satisfaction, which likely explains, at least in part, the popularity of subscription models. When customers pay once, after a while the product or service feels free. They use it less and satisfaction declines. A simple tool, look at the 9 and 0 effect. Most people associate the number 9 with value and 0 with quality. A burger meal may cost $4.99, while a gourmet meal $30. Sometimes you can increase sales by signifying value, other times by indicating quality. In addition to thinking about what the market will bear, also consider what you need to charge to make money. One rule of thumb is whatever the product costs you to make, mark it up by 100%. So that once you factor in overhead, including keeping the lights on and paying your employees, you are profitable. Finally, remember that price shapes customer perception. According to a study out of MIT, 82 people received identical painkiller placebos. Half of the participants were given a brochure that described the painkiller as a newly approved painkiller that cost $2.50 per dose, while half were told it cost 10 cents per dose, without being told why. In the full price group, 85% of the participants experienced a reduction in pain after taking the placebo. In the low price group, only 61% experienced less pain. Pricing is so much more than just what people will pay and what you need to be profitable. It is a cue to the customer about value. Let's say you have your business plan ready, you know who your customers are and what you're going to charge them. Now it's time to set up shop. The question is, bricks and mortar, online, or both? It depends. Some businesses require a physical presence. Bricks and mortar refers to a physical space, store or office customers can walk into during business hours. Bricks and mortar being a figure of speech that derives from the traditional materials used in the construction of buildings. If you require a storefront, you're going to start a spa, for example, there's no question, a physical space. When it's not so clear, as in you have a consumer product or service that could be sold entirely online, in addition to a web presence, do you also set up a store or push for retail distribution? My recommendation is start online if at all possible. The startup and overhead costs are significantly lower, frequently an order of magnitude lower. You'll still have to work hard to acquire customers, but if you make the right amount of noise, you'll have more people visiting your business than could possibly visit a physical space. And if you aspire to retail distribution or an actual storefront at some point, think of an online presence as your minimum viable product. If and when you decide on a bricks and mortar approach, here are a few things to consider so that you are more than a showroom for Amazon. The first step is to choose a specialty. Find a niche and cater to the enthusiasts. Specialize in something you know well, your distinctive strength, and then offer exclusive items, events tied to goods, or services tied to those goods. For example, Best Buy's Geek Squad will install a home theater at a deep discount. It's essential that you offer something that Amazon or other large businesses cannot provide. The second step is to curate your inventory. Whereas an online retailer has the largest possible selection because it isn't constrained by inventory capacity, too many choices can lead to shopper paralysis. Because you're the expert, you've winnowed down the options, stocking only the best solution products. The third step is to place an emphasis on non-commoditized items. Sure, you'll carry some mass-produced items, but focus on those that aren't, providing the best products at different price points. Also, look for ways to provide additional value, even something simple like a lollipop. The fourth consideration is to have a great website. Even though customers may want the gratification of shopping locally, they are probably still going to check you out before they show up. Make sure they can find out when you're open, see images of your inventory and size availability, and information about your return policy. They may even want to know that you would deliver the product today. The fifth consideration is to emphasize exclusivity and/or privacy. Sometimes customers want their service or product providers to cater to their taste, to feel that they have been invited to the club. Meanwhile, Amazon may be able to give good service because it's tracking your every online move, but it's also tracking your every move. When you purchase at a local retailer, the transaction is relatively anonymous. The final and most important consideration is to hire only superb customer-facing employees, employees who are knowledgeable, perhaps enthusiasts, empowered to make it right for the customer always. Whether on or offline, customer experience is your battleground. The entrepreneur that can provide the most frictionless experience at the lowest cost will be the victor. What's going to work for you, clicks or bricks? Once you've put together your business plan, it's time to build a financial model. The purpose of a financial model is to set short-term targets to keep you focused, track costs, monitor cash, and to see if you have a viable business. In short, to tell the story of your business using math. As your business gains traction, you may want to build an expansive, detailed model, but as a startup, you want to keep the calculations simple, focusing on just a few line items. The first item you forecast is revenue, which is price times volume. From your business plan, you've made a first pass at how much you'll sell and at what price. Is this forecast data-driven? Meaning, if you're estimating you'll sell 100 units, what are the assumptions behind that number? For example, if you have an online business and you know that the average conversion rate for your industry is 3%, this implies 3,333 visitors to your website each month. Is that realistic? You probably won't get the right numbers initially. That's okay. The point is to think logically and quantitatively about how you're going to generate revenue. This will give you a credible basis for analyzing your prospects. Having short-term targets will also keep you and your team focused. Next, calculate your costs. What are you spending to make and market your product? On employees, on office space? Is the cost of acquiring a customer lower than the revenue per customer? Are costs going up or down as a percentage of sales? While your revenue projections are just that, projections, you should be able to account for and categorize every penny spent. A surprising number of businesses go bust, not because there's no revenue, but because the owners have no idea where the money is going or can't keep a lid on costs. The next step is to solve for the profit or loss. If you can operate at a profit immediately, your business model works. If the numbers don't add up, analyze why. Do you need to sell more at a lower price, less at a higher price, or simply lower costs? You want to be patient for growth, impatient for profits. There is an equation underlying your business. Iterate until the equation works. Finally, know your burn rate. This is how much cash you use each month. And know your runway, or how long you have until you need to shut down. For example, if your burn rate is $20,000 per month and you have $160,000 in the bank, then you have 8 months of runway. Ideally, you'll build your business using resources on hand. But if the business doesn't lend itself to bootstrapping, you want to have enough runway that you can think strategically, but not so much that you don't feel the pressure to generate profit post-haste. If you're a proponent of the discovery-driven approach to entrepreneurship, as I am, it may be tempting to forego building a model. After all, you can't predict what will happen next. But if you want a clear read on your company's prospects, you need to look at the numbers. More importantly, a financial model is a barometer for your bottom line, because for an entrepreneur, cash really is king. Once you've run the numbers, you'll want to get serious about a legal structure. This is sometimes referred to as business formation. How you structure your business has implications for how profitable you are, how protected you are if something goes wrong, and how readily you can raise capital. There are 5 basic structures. The first is a sole proprietorship where one person legally makes up the whole company. If you have little concern about liability, this is the way to go. There are no setup costs, you have complete control, and it's tax efficient. No taxes are paid by the business. They pass through directly to you. This is often referred to as pass-through taxation. Service businesses such as landscaping, computer support, daycare, contractors are typically sole proprietors. The second is a limited liability company, commonly referred to as an LLC. An LLC does involve some setup costs and legal filings, but it's separate from you. With an LLC, as an individual, you have limited liability and your personal assets are protected, meaning a business creditor can't come after your house. As with a sole proprietorship, an LLC enjoys pass-through taxation. There's also the added benefit that you can issue stock and therefore raise outside capital. The third structure is a partnership. Law or investment firms are frequently structured as partnerships. It costs less to set up than an LLC and is a pass-through tax entity. However, the partners are responsible for the business obligations and debts, meaning, like a sole proprietorship, a business creditor could come after the personal assets of you and your partners. The fourth is a subchapter S corporation or S corp. If you expect your business to be generating a lot of cash quickly, the S-Corp could provide significant tax savings. Like an LLC, an S-Corp provides liability protection pass-through taxation, but the tax rate is lower. Whereas members of an LLC are subject to employment tax on the entire net income of the business, with an S-Corp, only wages are subject to tax. Further, if a shareholder sells, leaves, or dies, the S-Corp doesn't dissolve as it would with an LLC. The solidity of this structure does come at a price. Startup costs are higher, and there are more legal requirements. The fifth and final is a C-Corp. This is the structure you will want and need should you intend to raise venture capital or conduct an initial public offering. It's an independent entity, separate from the owners. None of your personal assets will be at risk, but there's double taxation. Not only are C-Corps subject to corporate income tax, earnings distributed as dividends are taxed at the individual rate. Regardless of your legal structure, be sure to keep your business and personal accounts separate. Hire a bookkeeper if need be. To run a business like a business and make sure your life is much easier come tax season, you want to avoid mixing business and personal accounts. Now for a disclaimer, because there's always a disclaimer with legal matters. Make sure to consult with an accountant and lawyer so that you form your business properly and obtain the necessary business licenses and approvals. If you want or need a low-cost solution initially, take a look at a service like LegalZoom. Finally, remember this isn't a binary operation where you get the structure right or wrong. As with your financial model, put an initial structure in place, probably sole proprietor, maybe LLC, then in a few months, assess, and if necessary, adapt. Intellectual property, commonly referred to as IP, is an important legal consideration for all startups. What if you pick a name for your business that infringes on someone else's trademark, or you haven't filed for protection of your own great brand names? What if you've hired an independent website and logo designer? Have they assigned the rights over to you? What if your website code incorporates open source code that has licensing restrictions? Intellectual property actually covers an array of legal ownership claims, which include 5 basic types. The first is trade secrets. These are defined as confidential information that gives a business its competitive edge. Trade secrets can include business plans, customer lists, pricing, designs, or procedures. At launch, you'll want to make sure that neither you nor your employees are using unauthorized IP from a former employer. As your business develops its own secrets, it will be important to have employees, independent contractors, and vendors sign non-disclosure agreements or NDAs. NDAs are critical in court as evidence of a trade secret. The second kind of IP is a trademark. Trademarks can be names, words, slogans, pictures, graphics, or sounds that distinguish a product. By making sure that you have a legal claim to each of these trademarks, you build brand identity and goodwill, but also ensure that you can use the trademark and that others don't pass off your services as theirs. To see if someone already has a trademark, there are 3 quick checks. Number 1, look at domain registrations. Is a .com taken? Number 2, Google the name you want to use. Number 3, do a free test or trademark electronic search system search in the Federal Registry to check for registrations. A coherent brand strategy includes the registration of core trademarks. The third kind of IP is copyright. Copyright law does not protect titles, slogans, names, or common expressions. Copyright protection only extends to original works of authorship fixed in a tangible medium of expression, giving you the exclusive rights to copy, sell, distribute, perform, and display work. If you have a website, you will want to pay attention to copyrights. If you don't have a copyright or clear license, a web developer or designer could claim that the website is theirs and shut you down. The best way to protect your rights is to have a written agreement that assigns the intellectual property rights to your company for the works you pay to create, including patents, which is the 4th type of IP. A patent is a set of exclusive rights granted to an inventor in exchange for detailed public disclosure of an invention. A patent can be obtained for inventions that are new, useful, and non-obvious. Each of these concepts sounds simple, but it's complicated and based on case law. Because the process of filing for a patent with a Patent and Trade Office, or PTO, can cost tens of thousands of dollars, filing a provisional patent with the PTO, which you can do yourself, is a nice stopgap before a formal application. The 5th and final is publicity rights. The right of publicity, or personality right, is the right of an individual to keep one's image and likeness from being commercially exploited without permission or contractual compensation. What this means for you? As you build your business, avoid using anyone's name or likeness without permission. Intellectual property is so much more than patents. Protect it. It's one of your most valuable assets. Now that you've run the numbers and are confident that you've got the makings of a real business, let's drill down on the what, where, and when. For example, what are the processes and procedures you will use to produce your product or provide your service? What inputs do you need, whether physical goods or information? How will you source these materials? Who are your suppliers or vendors? and how will you choose them? Next, take a look at inventory management, or how you'll track what you sell. If you have physical goods, where will you store them? Will you build to order or build to stock? You'll then want to consider logistics and delivery. Once you have something to sell, what are the logistics involved to get the product or service to the customer? For example, what are your delivery channels? Will you deliver the product yourself, or will you outsource? If you're delivering a service or information, how quickly will that delivery happen? It seems like an obvious question, but when you think about your online experiences, speed and simplicity are paramount. One of the most important elements of operations is customer service. In preparing a business plan, you articulate why customers will prefer you to any would-be competitors. How do you need to operate your business so that they actually do prefer you? And as you add your first and second employees, what are your expectations around service? We sometimes think of the customer experience as marketing. Marketing is what we say we are. Operations is about making our marketing true. It's the day-to-day details of running a business. As you launch your business, you will need to decide if you are going to fly solo or form a founding team. There are a number of reasons why you may decide to go solo. You have enough of what you need: expertise, networks, and money to get off the ground. You want to retain 100% of the equity and decision-making. You like to work alone. If you decide to go the route of a co-founder, here are some tips for ensuring that you pull together a founding team that works. First, you'll want to look at the relationships of the co-founders. There will be an allure to founding a company with family and/or friends. This is in part because with a prior work relationship, you have already thought carefully about your respective roles and have verified that you have complementary rather than overlapping skills and that you can actually work together. Further, one of you has probably already emerged as the leader, and it won't necessarily be the person with the idea. Making a call about who will be in charge likely implies you've made a decision about how you will make decisions. There will still be disagreement, so be aware of the titles you give yourselves and their implications. Third, you need to think about how to divide the spoils. This will be the hardest conversation you have. If you worked together before, it will be a bit easier. Ideally, though, you'll wait as long as possible to divide the equity. Apportioning equity is typically based on the founder's past and present contributions, opportunity costs, and motivations. Because roles and responsibilities invariably evolve, a dynamic equity split is advised. This involves breaking down the launch of the startup into separate phases, weighting the importance of each phase. Let's say you're starting a business with two other individuals. You decide that the pre-launch phase of your product will create 40% of the company's value, and that you, with the idea, will contribute 60% of the value during that period, while each of your partners is creating 20% of the value, respectively. On that basis, for the first phase or pre-launch phase, your equity split is 60% of the 40%, or 24%, while your partners receive 20% of 40%, or 8% of the total equity of the company. In the subsequent phases, the remaining 60% of the equity will be allocated. As you develop this template together, you can focus on criteria, weightings, and responsibilities rather than quibbling over specific numbers. The most common type of a dynamic equity split is vesting, which requires founders to earn their equity stakes based on time or milestones. Again, this is a hard conversation, but if you can't have it, you may have the wrong partners. Working with a co-founder is similar to marriage. In fact, it's frequently more difficult to dissolve a business partnership than a marriage. To move through the ups and downs, it's vital to sort out relationships, roles, and rewards. From my experience, it's also important to have a lawyer in place who can protect your interests. But once that's in place, it is vital that you look for every opportunity to reinforce trust. Because when you have a business partner who has your back, you can get through nearly any up and down the business throws your way. Your business is growing. You can no longer do everything by yourself. It's time to hire your first employee. You know it's a critical decision. How do you get this right? The first suggestion is to identify what you really need the hire to do. This is surprisingly difficult because there's often a gap between what we think we need and what we actually need. Further, according to recent research, we tend to hire people similar to us. This helps with communication, but there also needs to be enough difference so skill sets are complementary, not redundant. In order to piece together a high-performing team, there are a number of diagnostics available, such as Teamability and Plum. Just as the Myers-Briggs test helps you identify your personality type, these diagnostics help you determine your team type or what kind of team player you are. The second is try before you buy. Some people interview extremely well, others don't, which is one of the reasons that hiring is so tricky. It's like running for president of the United States. Campaigning requires a very different skill set than actually governing. During a trial period, you can gauge how hard a person works, uncover their true superpowers, and most importantly, see how they respond to stress. Everyone has bad days. You just want to make sure that your bad and their bad isn't a dangerous cocktail. There used to be a stigma attached to asking people to freelance for a time, but with our workforce becoming increasingly modular, a trial stint is more common. A corollary to this is to hire for expertise, not credentials. As Francis Pedraza, CEO and founder of Everest, says, quote, "The experienced candidate might have a resume which on paper gives you a lot of confidence, but you have to be open to the possibility that it might be the candidate with less experience or with an unconventional background who is the right person for the role. Some of my most expensive hires I made ended up not working out, while several of my unconventional hires have been total game changers. For example, one engineer without a college degree almost instantly transformed the entire engineering culture at the company. Not only was he a great individual contributor, creating very dramatic overnight improvements in the performance of our application, he has won the respect of the entire product team and eventually the entire company as a leader," end quote. A fourth is to think of employees as assets and not cost centers. Athelia Woolley, the CEO of Shabby Apple, says, quote, "For several years, I was penny wise and pound foolish about hiring. I tried to control costs by spending as little as possible on employees. A couple of years ago, I hired several people to be customer service representatives and paid them slightly above minimum wage. At the time, I thought that it was an easy job and shouldn't cost the company much, but I thought wrong. After spending an inordinate amount of time spinning in the revolving door of surly and irresponsible hires, I learned that if I just paid several dollars more per hour when I hired, I would attract better people. Now, my payroll costs are higher, but I spend much less time managing poor hires, and our customers receive service from helpful and happy employees," end quote. Booker T. Washington said, "Few things help an individual more than to let him know that you trust him." Once you've done your homework on a hire, hammered out the rules of engagement, it'll be time to do the seemingly impossible, let go, and trust them to do their job. As you build your company, you may decide that you want or need an advisory board. An advisory board is a committee of typically 4 to 10 individuals who lend their expertise, networks, and cachet to the organization without taking on the fiduciary and legal responsibilities of a governing board. In either case, board members are expected to be ambassadors or walking billboards for your company. In pulling together your board, identify what you don't have but need to take your organization to the next level, whether it's strategic partnerships, improving customer acquisition, scaling operationally, driving down costs, or personifying your target market. One clue to what you need is to observe which tasks you and or your team put off doing, saying, "I know that's important, but I'll deal with it later," but then never do. Most of us have things we worry about almost obsessively. Those things get done. With your advisory board, you'll want to bring on an advisor who will worry about the things you don't want to think about. Next, be aware of an inclination to bring on more experienced versions of you. These are the people you most admire. You may even want to be like them when you grow up. One of these individuals on board is good. They can act as an in-house mentor, but the more overweight you are on expertise you don't need, the more likely you'll be underweight the expertise you do need. Then, only bring on people you trust. Because your advisory board members will have core competencies that are complementary to yours, they will know things you don't, which means you may feel vulnerable. You need to feel safe so you can ask stupid questions. Once you've got the right people on board, make specific asks such as, "I would like to know I can reach out to you for advice and you will respond within 48 hours. Or, "I would like you to review the company financials once a quarter and make suggestions for our KPIs or key performance indicators." Or, "Review our RFP or request for a proposal for a new technology platform." Other possibilities are make recommendations around customer acquisition, refine our investor pitch, connect us with media outlets, or introduce us to prospective investors. Because you're drawing on hard-earned expertise, it's important to find ways to compensate your advisory board members. Depending on what your company does, offering the product you produce can often be an appropriate way to compensate board members. Another common form of compensation is cash, which can range from a few $100s per quarter to several thousand. For growth startups, the CEO often offers equity. A typical equity allocation is 25 to 50 basis points, or 25 to 50% of 1% of equity per advisor. So what does this look like? Well, let's say your company is valued at $500,000. 1% of that is $5,000. A stake of 50 basis points is worth $2,500. Finally, find people who love your company. Advisors can be among your most important advocates. Hunt for people who love you and your product and would likely tell people about you even if they weren't on the board. Paraphrasing the Beatles, you really can't buy my love. If it's not just a little personal, you're not in business. You know it's important to bring on the right co-founder, hire the right people, and get the right advisors on board. But how do you actually find the right people? Much as a computer network is a collection of computers that facilitate communications and allow users to share data, we network to gain access to broader resources, including expertise and capital. Here are a few tips for activating and expanding your network. Once you've done the hard work of identifying resources you need to build your business, make sure you can articulate what you're looking for. 30-second elevator pitch style. A distilled ask will make it easy for you to tap into your network. You'll want to start by networking with your friends and family. They may not understand exactly what you're doing, but because they want to see you succeed, they will likely be supportive and helpful. If you can simplify what you need, the people you've built strong ties with will do what they can to help you reach your goals. While individuals with whom you have strong ties have a vested interest in you, don't discount the value of your weak ties or acquaintances, which you have more of than ever because of sites like LinkedIn. A distilled ask gives them something to trade or to barter with as they expand their own network. Just as people are more likely to find a job through weak ties, according to social psychologist Mark Granovetter, you are more likely to build your business through weak ties, as they can expand your access to expertise beyond friends and family. A weak tie can be the node or connection point into an entirely different network. In addition to your ask being clear, you'll want to ask the right person for the right thing, ideally something that may be valuable to you but is very low cost for them. For example, the CEO of a startup I advised had spent a number of hours on market research, not getting an answer. Because I know someone in this particular industry, I was able to get an answer very quickly. The CEO got valuable information at a low cost to the expert I asked. And remember, networking should be transactional, a give for a get. Asking someone to do something for you just to be nice can deplete your social capital very quickly. When you ask for help and receive it, I would recommend asking what you might do for the giver, no matter how asymmetrical things may seem in your relationship. You may be surprised by what a person of higher status might need, and you might provide for them. According to social anthropologists Melinda Blau and Karen Fingerman, most of us like to think of ourselves as independent agents marching through life to our own iPod soundtrack, but our relationships propel us as well. The problem is that networks are like traffic jams. You can easily see the cars that surround you, your intimates, but it takes a helicopter to view your entire entourage, your social convoy. Seeing our lives from this aerial view allows us to understand that life is as much about who you associate with as who you are. And the ability to bring people into your convoy when you need them is a key coping mechanism in a complex world, end quote. To build a business, we need to network. We may be wary of considering transactions or trades in the context of a relationship, but we will be far more effective by remembering the give and get rule. Networking is, in fact, a lot of work. But if we do it well, we can get so much more done.
When we wake.
In order to persuade customers to buy your product, suppliers to provide lines of credit, banks to lend, and investors to invest, you will need to tell your story. In crafting your story, the first thing you want to do is answer the question, why? Why did you start your company? Why this product or service? Why you? Be patient with yourself during this process. Getting a story on paper when the startup is your brainchild and you poured so much of your time, talent, and identity into the business can be surprisingly difficult. To help you figure out the why of your product, you may also want to ask your customers, why do they buy your product? Why do your employees want to work at your company? And when people engage with your brand on social media, what do they say? The second thing you will want to do is to make your message memorable. There are a number of techniques you can employ to do this. Third, make it easy for people to share your story. The best way to craft an airtight soundbite is to use alliteration, iambic meter, or 5 syllables, and rhyme. For example, click it or ticket is better than buckle up for safety. When people can repeat your story and delight in saying your name, they're more likely to become brand ambassadors. In terms of getting people to share your story online, in addition to putting your story in writing, tell your story with images and with videos. In an era where content marketing is king, for brands, the content has become the ad. As a startup, the best advertising you have is a compelling Genesis story. Whether customer, supplier, lender, or investor, we want to buy from entrepreneurs with a passion for what they are doing. It's a given that you want to make money, and your business plan and financial model will help tease out the market opportunity and whether there's early traction. But it's the passion that predicts grit and staying power. One of the best ways for a customer to gauge passion is to say, "Tell me your story." There are several elements to building a good website. The first is usability. Because users are not patient enough to spend a lot of time trying to figure out where information is, menu items need to be clear. Text needs to be readable. Navigation should be easy with important information less than 2 clicks away. The site should be designed to work with any type of browser and on any type of device, whether on a laptop, tablet, or smartphone. The second consideration is structure. Just as a builder uses blueprints to build a house, you'll want a blueprint for your site. Creating a website goes much more smoothly if you take the time to sketch, either by hand or on a computer, what the pages will actually look like, where menus will go, what they will be called, and where photos and text blocks will go. You'll then want to consider layout. The layout should be clean and engaging to the primary users and customers. Branding, colors, and fonts should be consistent throughout. And remember to optimize your site for lead generation and conversion. I recommend that you use HubSpot's free marketing grader, a tool that measures and analyzes all of your marketing efforts as a checklist. If you build the website yourself, there are a number of good options. The first is WordPress, which can be used as a blog or the back end of a regular website. Another is Squarespace, a hosted service that allows you to build sites with a drag and drop editor. If you're looking for an e-commerce solution, Shopify and Big Cartel are reputable. If you decide to hire someone to build your website, be aware that there is a difference between a web designer and a web developer. The designer is like an architect, the creative expert who creates the look of the site. They work with you to make sure the pre-designed sketches look the way you want. The designer then mocks up the site and hands it off to the web developer. A web developer is like a builder, the one writing the code, taking the creative vision of the client and designer and making sure the website looks and functions correctly. For basic sites, you may want to go the route of a designer who can do basic programming customizations on WordPress or Squarespace. Even if you're outsourcing the build, you will still need to give some real thought to the structure and layout. Will your blog run ads? Do you need a shop? What do you want people to learn about the services and or products you provide? The designer will ask you if you already own a domain and have hosting set up. They can either instruct you on how to acquire these or they will provide that service for you. They will also ask for any logos, marketing, or design elements previously utilized by your business to make sure the branding is cohesive. Your website is both a calling card and point of sale. You'll want to get this right. Once you have a product or service that you know will sell, it's time to start marketing. One essential tool is a blog. A blog is a long-term marketing asset that will bring traffic to your website. The more blog posts you publish, the more indexed pages you create for search engines to display in their results. And the stickier the content, the better. This doesn't necessarily mean pretty, professional, or well-written. It means unique, memorable, and shareable. Which leads to the second way to drive traffic to your site, social media. What you use will depend on your preference and where the customers are. Artifact Uprising, for example, they make high-quality photo books. They focus on Instagram, while inbound marketing company HubSpot concentrates on LinkedIn. It used to be that the best way to get SEO or search engine optimized traffic to your site was to accumulate as many backlinks as possible. These incoming links are still helpful, but social media coverage is increasingly important in driving SEO power. Now that you're successfully pulling in visitors to your site, you're ready to focus on lead generation, or the process of converting visitors on your website into leads. A person usually becomes a lead when they fill out a form in return for some sort of offer, whether it's a webinar, a free product, or something else of value on a targeted landing page. You'll then want to identify brand ambassadors. While you need to be able to tell your story, it is typically more effective to have others talk about you than to talk about yourself. Brand ambassadors already like you. As you incentivize them, they'll talk about you even more. The incentive doesn't need to be monetary. It can be a discount, or you can do what Diet Coke did. A cheap online marketing tool is the affiliate program or a fee for referral. Two of the largest marketplaces are Commission Junction and PepJam. As with ad campaigns, you need to understand how it works so you don't get taken advantage of. Again, from Wooly, Commission Junction offers free online seminars on how to either hire affiliates or become one yourself. Even if you decide to outsource your affiliate program, you may want to take one of these courses so that you can understand the details behind the marketing system. Once you're ready for prime time, contact media outlets. If you're contacting media outlets yourself, forego the large national publications. Instead, opt for smaller bloggers, Instagrammers, and YouTubers. Offer to give them something in return for talking about your product. If you're looking to hire an agency, try to find one that you can pay on a fee-for-service basis, like Live in 5 PR, not on a monthly retainer. Retainers create misaligned incentives and lock you into a service. Finally, remember that nothing ruins a bad business faster than good marketing. There are so many ways to get the word out about your company. You'll know you've hit upon the right mix because when you market well, customers will find you. As you think about your customers, there are several things I'd like you to consider. The first is, do you love your customers? Marketing guru Seth Godin says there are two ways to think about your customers. You love your customers because they pay you money, or you love your customers and sometimes there's a transaction. In the first, the customers are a means to an end. In the second, you exist to serve customers and profit allows you to do that. If you don't love your customers, that's not necessarily a bad thing, but it may be a cue that you're in the wrong business for you. When you find customers for whom you can be all in, you want to show them the love. All too often, we spend every waking hour and huge line items in our budget on customer acquisition. Once a prospect becomes a customer, we forget them, just as we frequently do in our personal lives. When we're dating, we continually find ways to delight our beloved. Surprise texts, special meals, hard-to-come-by event tickets. But once we've converted them to a boyfriend, girlfriend, husband, wife, we put the relationship on maintenance. For a time, we stay engaged, but once we become secure, we start to take the relationship for granted. There are a number of ways to show love. One is to find the yes in a customer request. Companies that say yes are more likely to go viral. This is easier said than done because it means you empower your employees to do what they need to do when the customer needs it, which means you need employees with good judgment. Therefore, you need to hire well. You'll also want to be responsive. Most customers want to be left alone until they want something. When they ask, hop to it. An increasing number of internet users who reach out to a brand online expect an answer back within 30 minutes. And learn to apologize. Customers may not always be right. In fact, they frequently won't be. Finally, you'll want to follow up. A big difference between good and great service is follow-up. Not customer service surveys, these take time, but personalized follow-up. When the customer asks for something specifically, get back to them quickly, calling them by their formal name. Delight them, and then some. According to Jeff Riddle, an expert in customer experience, based on the analysis of huge amounts of data, 70 to 80% of new customers are generated not by formal marketing and acquisition initiatives, but by word of mouth from the 5% of existing customers that were most delighted with the product and service. The cost of customer acquisition continues to climb. The irony is that if you care about your customers, they will trust you, and trust is a shortcut to customer acquisition. If you really want to build your business, stop spending time and energy on would-be customers and give your current customers some love. You've made a lot of progress in building a business. Now it's time to take a breather and survey the scene to see what you've learned and where you want to flex, possibly even pivot. Let's begin by reviewing your sales. Where are your customers coming from? Are you solving the problem you thought you would solve? Selling more or less than you thought you would? What about the price point? Initially, you're going to look at vanity metrics like number of visits. We all do. On the surface, this is exciting, but it isn't going to give you any information or insight about why your business is growing or not. Like, what percentage of visitors to your site are returning visitors? What percentage of visitors are converting into leads, meaning signing up for something on your site? Is this percentage increasing or decreasing? Now, I know you may be thinking, well, this is a lot of questions. To make reviewing and considering these questions easier, I've included a list of questions in the exercise files. Be sure to take a look and follow along. So one of the best ways to really get at whether your product or service is actually improving is cohort analysis. At its simplest, this means dividing up your customers into related groups rather than viewing them as one unit. For a startup, cohort analysis usually involves clustering users by the day, week, or month they first started using your product. The great thing about this kind of analysis is that each new group provides the opportunity to start with a fresh set of users. This allows you to gauge how well you're engaging with customers or audience independent of growth. Next, you want to examine costs. Are they higher or lower than expected? What about the cost of customer acquisition? Which source of customers is most cost-effective? And which will be easiest to scale? Again, using cohort analysis, is the cost of customer acquisition increasing or decreasing? It's also time to do a check-in with your co-founder. How are you working together? Are your roles and responsibilities stable or are they shifting? If you agreed on a dynamic equity split, is it time for an adjustment? Consider your employees. Are you in compliance with labor laws? Specifically, is everyone who should be classified as an employee classified as such? There are stringent laws about paying people as independent contractors. And are your employees happy? Is their ability to serve the customer improving? Are they improving the bottom line? If someone isn't really working out, are you dismissing the person quickly and appropriately? Based on everything you've learned, how is your burn rate, the amount of cash you're losing monthly, changing? What adjustments are required? Among the most important questions are those that involve self-reflection. Are you still playing to your strengths? And are you still enjoying being an entrepreneur? As you complete your periodic check-in, if you find yourself going in a different direction, you won't be alone. 70% of all successful new businesses end up in a different place too, from Groupon that started out as an activism platform and Netflix that began as a door-to-door DVD rental service. As an innovator, you are in pursuit of a something that is yet to be defined. While it's important to develop a business plan and financial model, you still need an emergent strategy. You've now taken a step forward. You've gathered feedback. Today, it's time to adapt. As a startup, you won't have everything figured out, but you do need to know you're moving in the right direction. This is where metrics come into play, having access to numbers that can provide a snapshot of how your business is doing. The good news is you only need to focus on 5 metrics: acquisition, activation, retention, referral, revenue, or R, commonly referred to as pirate metrics, which were popularized by venture investor and PayPal alum Dave McClure. I'm going to talk about these metrics in the context of an online business, but you'll quickly see that with minor tweaks, they can be applied much more broadly. The first metric is acquisition, or how many people visit your store or site. So let's say you search engine optimized your site, are engaging on social media, and you may even have a few mentions in the press. You've got visitors. If you're like me, you are tracking how many, probably using Google Analytics. You'll know if you have the right kind of visitors or potential customers by tracking your bounce rate. Your bounce rate is a percentage of customers that visit your store or site but leave immediately without completing a transaction. A healthy bounce rate is around 30%. So if you have 100 visitors, 70 actually land. The second metric is activation, or the percentage of users who not only land on your site but have a happy first visit. They stay more than 10 seconds, read 2+ pages, for example. You want this number to be at least 50% of all your visitors. From here, you're looking for at least 20% to click on a link or a button. The most important metric is retention. This doesn't mean a visitor has made a purchase. It just means that they're signaling they plan to come back by providing you with their contact information, for example. This number should be at least 10% of total visitors, but of course will vary depending on your business. A simple way to get started with retention is interviewing customers and potential customers, or as Steve Blank says, get out of the building. This will likely mean engaging on social media, reading and responding to inquiries quickly, anything that will better acquaint you with what people are really hiring your business to do. The fourth metric is referrals, the customers who recommend you. A successful business has a viral coefficient greater than 1, meaning for every customer, they recommend you to more than one person. What you need here is for at least 1% of your visitors, and thus a sizable percentage of your actual customers, to tell more than one person about you, and the sooner, the better. The final metric is revenue. You want lots of visitors who sign up, come back, and talk about you, but you are only in business if people are willing to pay you. So the question is, how well are you monetizing visits? The conversion rate or percentage of visitors that become customers will vary depending on your business, but should be at the very least 1 to 2%. Shortly, you'll be ready to scale your business, at which point the number of metrics you track may multiply. But during this experimentation phase, when you are seeking empathy, stickiness, and virality, the pirate metrics are the ones that matter. And remember, if your metrics make you just a little bit embarrassed, then be assured you've got the right ones. One of the skills that you must have as an entrepreneur is the ability to negotiate. Here are a few suggestions on how to do this. The first is signaling when you're transacting. If you come out of the corporate world, unless you're in sales, yours is always a soft sell. There's a transaction, but you may never actually negotiate. As an entrepreneur, you will negotiate continually with your customers, suppliers, and possible investors. It's important to give cues so that people know when you're entering into a negotiation, such as, this is what my company does. Here's the problem we solve for our customers. This, by the way, is one of the reasons it's easier to do business with people you've worked with before. That you're transacting is a given, but it's just not always the case with friends. The next thing you want to do is learn to sit on both sides of the table. Another way to say this is to look for the win-win, learning how to lay out the logic of what you're proposing in the context of your relationship. This also means that you don't negotiate just to negotiate. Sometimes what the party has presented is fair enough, and for the sake of the relationship, you stop. When it's not about me, but we, you're sitting on both sides of the table. The next thing I would suggest you do is to avoid ultimatums. In film and television, we often see standoffs and ultimatums. They make for great drama, but don't try this at work. When you are at an impasse, be creative. Consider the whole deal. What do you have that is valuable to your counterpart, and vice versa? Also ask yourself, what deal would make me over the moon happy, or trigger my resentment? Now, strike a deal somewhere in between. This doesn't mean you never say no. When you set a price or a point at which you need to walk away, you remove stress and anxiety. If you know when a transaction is unprofitable, you will do more deals that make sense and less that don't. Another thing I'd recommend as you negotiate is to look to the horizon. Thinking about the long term requires confidence, though. You have to believe you can get to where you want to go, so it's scary, but it's vital. It will guide you in tactical negotiations that drive short-term business results and push you to negotiate in such a way that you preserve the relationships you need to stay in business. Now, something I want you to watch for is wanting a deal too much. When a negotiation becomes charged with emotion, there's usually something else at play. It's important to figure out what it is because it makes you vulnerable. And that means you're probably about to give up a lot, and you still won't get what you really wanted. Nothing will improve your bottom line, personally, professionally, and emotionally more consistently than being able to effectively negotiate. Some of us are good at the get, others at the give. But a one-sided approach to negotiation leads to fractured relationships. Learn to do both, and you can build a business and relationships that last a lifetime. A According to the U.S. Small Business Administration, nearly 30% of the businesses declaring bankruptcy cite problems with the financial structure of the company. And the fact is, as a startup, cash will probably be tight. At a minimum, you should know what your cash burn rate is so that you know how much runway you have. For a refresher on burn rate and runway, check out the video in Chapter 2 on building a financial model. Again, though, this is at a minimum. In order to run your business well and without the stress that uncertainty brings, you will need to know more. The first step is to see how much cash you have once a week. Look at the balance of your accounts, checking, savings, and anywhere else you may have available funds. That's your cash on hand. Then look at your receivables, money you've earned but haven't yet collected. What could convert into cash this week? Is it possible that you can nudge the collection process forward? And what do you need to pay this week? As a startup, you can't possibly think in years, and not really even in months. You've got to know where you are week to week. As a second step, act like you're broke and do a 13-week cash flow forecast. You may have plenty of cash, but if you act like you don't, your cash will last longer and you'll have more of it. What are your expected inflows over the next 13 weeks? Your outflows. Watch out for confusing revenue with cash flow. Some people take longer to pay than expected, or they don't pay. Anticipate unexpected expenses. A 13-week time frame will allow you to capture the ups and downs of a quarter, to think concretely and realistically. Sure, you have projections, but for a startup, any forecast beyond a few months is fiction. The third step involves what is referred to in accounting as closing the books. While a hard closing is an involved technical process which you will need to implement as you scale, for now, a soft close will suffice and involves categorizing your transactions. This, by the way, is something you may want to outsource. A bookkeeper, for example, can track your receivables and payables and make sure all your receipts, contracts, and invoices are accounted for. This process allows you to be in tune with your numbers, and it will make end-of-the-year accounting much less torturous. The net effect of tracking your cash will be higher revenues and collections, lower costs, and a signal that you need to start fundraising before your situation becomes bleak. We improve what we measure, mind your cash, and ka-ching. You've started a company and it goes belly up. Or you launched a new product and not only does it fail to sell, customers actually hate it. What happens when you dare to dream, make that dream real, and then fail? As I've grappled with my own "this just may break me" failures, I am increasingly convinced that building a business is a process, an engine of experimentation. As we learn by doing, something will eventually and inevitably not work. At this point, we have to decide how we'll approach failure. As you see here, ask yourself, did I fail my way into a black hole? Or is failure a tool that will help me build a more successful business? Here are a few tips to get you started. First and foremost, acknowledge the emotional effect failure has on you. When you start a company, there is a fantasy that most of us engage in. You'll work hard, your business will succeed, you will find contentment and happiness with your accomplishments. But business isn't one straight shot to success. There are ups and downs like the stock market, with the occasional zero. Then what? When I backed a business that imploded, apart from feeling mortified, I was heartbroken. I had been all in. I had envisioned a future in which I would achieve a goal, perhaps be hailed as the conquering hero, and then I wasn't. I've learned it's important to grieve. When we sublimate the sadness, we risk losing our passion, which is essential to building a business. Next, ditch the shame. If you let failure become a referendum on you, the millstone of shame will drown you and your dreams. According to Dr. Brené Brown, when the ethos is kill or be killed, control or be controlled, failure is tantamount to being killed. Being perceived as weak can elicit tremendous shame. For example, the business I fronted that went belly up, shouldn't I have better read the situation? How could I claim to be a savvy investor? If we don't ditch the shame, we will never throw ourselves into another venture. Pull shame out of the equation when you fail, and there's no limit to what you can accomplish. As you deal with failure in building your business, the narrative you construct is key. It's about learning the right kind of lesson, or what lean startup guru Eric Ries describes as validated learning. Ask the question, what valuable truth did you discover about the present and future prospects of your startup by failing? Was my takeaway when the business had imploded to never invest in another friend's business? Instead, I gained the valuable insight that vetting prospective partners is vital, as are clear rules of engagement. Learning is the essential unit of progress for startups, says Ries. For most of us, the mere prospect of failure is a take-no-prisoners mind game, pushing us to the edge of an emotional cliff where shame would happily push us over. But in a world in desperate need of your startup mentality, it's important to bury shame and to see failure for what it is, an opportunity to learn valuable truths and a signal that our startup really matters, so much so that we're willing to invest not only our minds, but our hearts. As an entrepreneur, you are a dreamer, dedicated to achieving your goals. Your passion will make you successful. It can also cause stress, which means that your mind and body don't yet have the adaptive capacity to deal with what is happening. This can affect your memory and immune system and overall health. And because people pick up on and mimic your stress level, when you're stressed out, your team likely is too. The question then is, how will you manage the stress of high expectations, long hours, setbacks, and successes, and importantly, increase your adaptive capacity as an entrepreneur? The first step is to give yourself a break. You can do this by approaching your business as a marathon, not a sprint. According to marathon training expert Jeff Galloway, the best way to do this without injury is to adopt the run, walk, run approach. Another aspect of this is you need to build stamina and endurance. If you're not used to working flat out, starting at a sprint pace is unsustainable. You need to work up to it. Therefore, figuring out how you're going to gradually increase your pace is also an important part of this approach. One thing I do is to work in 15-minute increments, setting the timer on my phone, after which I take a 5-minute break. At night, I've stopped checking my phone and wait for 15 minutes in the morning before checking messages, thinking about what's really important. It can be through prayer, meditation, or journaling. Also, consider resting 1 day a week. It's counterintuitive, I know, but trust me, you will be more productive in the remaining 6 days. The next step to managing stress is to take care of your body. Exercise. When you take a 5-minute break from working, walk for 5 minutes. Eat good food, meaning eat or drink more of what makes you feel good, avoiding what debilitates you. Mine is sugar. And follow Arianna Huffington's advice to get more sleep. Pick just one, exercise, food, or sleep, and work on it this coming week. The third step is to maintain connections with the people who will love you, whether your business is successful or not. Maybe you call a friend or a family member once a day. You'll know if the person is the right person because there's no transaction, nothing bought or sold when you hang up the phone. Even better, have lunch with or take a walk with a friend once a week. If you have children at home, have dinner together whenever possible. When you have a world that revolves around relationships outside of your work, you will be happier and better able to adapt to the stress of startup life. Finally, do not underestimate the power of your mind, which means if you will give yourself a break, take care of your body, and connect to those you love, you will increase your adaptive capacity, becoming better at dealing with the stresses of startup life and at turning setbacks into success. Financial capital is one of the key inputs for growing your firm. This is the money you use to buy what you need to make your products or provide your services. Your motivations and goals will impact the types and amounts of capital you raise. You may be driven by financial gains and rapid growth. You may want to be your own boss or do something you genuinely love. Augment family income while balancing work and family. Or maybe you're pulled into entrepreneurship by an unmet need in the market. Your motivations will not only impact the kind of business you start, but also what kind of financing strategies you use. If you want and need your business to scale quickly, you may decide to bring in equity investors. Otherwise, you may be able to finance the business through personal savings and earnings. However you decide to finance your business, remember that bootstrapping will allow you to get the most out of your plan. Bootstrapping involves techniques that lower expenses and leverage the resources you already have on hand. These could be, number 1, work at your home. 2, obtaining low-cost or no-cost services such as using equipment at a local restaurant or church. 3, leasing rather than buying. 4, delaying compensation. 5, using temporary personnel. Or 6, bartering to obtain products and services. It could even involve a Kickstarter or crowdfunding campaign in order to prototype or pre-fund your product. For more on this, you can listen to the modules on bootstrapping and crowdfunding. One of the most common sources of startup financing is debt. Because banks rarely lend to an early-stage startup, debt financing usually involves loans from friends or family, credit card debt, or personal loans. While you may need to take on personal debt initially, once your business is established with steady sales, profitable growth, and collateral, you should try to do debt financing through your company. The advantage of debt financing is it allows you to maintain full control over your business. Plus, interest on a business loan is tax deductible. The disadvantage is that you have to service the debt, which could be a risk. If your business doesn't generate sufficient cash to make the debt payments, you may need to use money from your personal accounts to service the debt. Otherwise, you will likely suffer the consequences of defaulting on a loan. Another common source of financing is equity. This is usually most appropriate for businesses looking to scale quickly. Equity financing involves selling an ownership stake in your business for cash. Equity investors may come in the form of friends and family, angel investors, high net worth individuals who take a personal stake, or venture capitalists, a professional investment organization that invests in order to make a profit. At some point, you may even explore an accelerator, which typically takes 5 to 8% equity in exchange for a small amount of startup cash and mentorship. Not surprisingly, this is the hardest type of financing to obtain because it comes at a huge risk to the investor. More than a third of all new businesses fail within the first year. So you will need to persuade the investor that you, the entrepreneur, and your business are a risk worth taking. Further, once you sell a stake in your company, you've got partners. This will involve collaboration and shared decision-making. If the business does fail, you don't need to pay the investors back, but it's important to be aware of the implications for relationships if you do lose their money. You could lose something much more valuable. So take this very seriously. One other option that may make sense for a potential high-growth business is convertible debt. This is a hybrid between debt and equity. You're not ready to decide on valuation, or you want the option of paying back the cash. This is typically issued to angel or venture investors who are looking to back you and are ready to provide a smaller initial round of financing. Now that you know what kinds of financing options are available to you, circle back to your motivations and what kind of business you're starting. Once you've decided on the why and the what, you'll have a good idea of the right financing strategy for you and your business. An emerging form of financing is crowdfunding. This is a collection of funds through small contributions from many different people in order to finance a particular project. For entrepreneurs looking to eventually attract investors, a crowdfunding campaign can demonstrate market demand and attract publicity. First, use the campaign to fund a very specific project or product run within the business. It's not an open-ended call for money. Second, limit how much money you try to raise. The majority of successful campaigns are looking to raise $25,000 or less. Third, There's a reason it's called a campaign. Like a political campaign, successful crowdfunding is dependent on well-thought-out marketing and a grassroots strategy that will take 3 to 6 months to come to fruition. Fourth, tend to the campaign daily. Once launched, you need to have a dedicated person who promotes awareness through targeted emails and social media on a daily basis. Fifth, expect to work hard to reach your target. Also, you'll want to have a budget for the campaign that factors in the administrative costs of using a crowdfunding platform, the cost to deliver the incentives or rewards to donors. You'll also want to be sure you can comply with all the fine print that comes with using a crowdfunding platform like Kickstarter or Indiegogo. If you violate any of their policies, they have the right to terminate your campaign, withhold funds, or even sue. In addition to demonstrating market demand, crowdfunding gives you the chance to interact with your target demographic to learn what people like or not about your product or service. It's a great testing ground for your product and team, and in effect, a graduated form of bootstrapping. Also, using donor-based or rewards-based crowdfunding allows you to raise money for your business without taking on debt or giving up company ownership. All too often, entrepreneurs turn to crowdfunding when they have exhausted other funding options. If your pitch is fund me or my dream dies, you're in trouble. But if your pitch is fund me so that you can have first dibs at this fabulous new idea, you are proving market demand. While a successful crowdfunding campaign is not a guarantee of continued success, it is a sign of good business. And if you reach your funding target and deploy the capital as promised, you significantly raise the odds of getting additional funding because you've proven there's demand for your product. And within this microcosm of a business that is your business, you've proven you've got the goods to execute. If you decide that your business requires equity financing, you will need equity investors, whether friends, family, angels, or venture capitalists. Here are some tips for how to make that happen. First, prepare an elevator pitch that you can deliver in under a minute to anyone you meet. You never know who may have interest in financing your business. If you can explain what problem you solve, why you're the one to solve it, and why this will make money for investors in less than a minute, even a chance meeting can turn into a pitch. An easy to understand and share elevator pitch is a great way to leverage your whole network and generate buzz for your business. You'll also want to be able to explain what you do in writing in no more than a paragraph or two. More and more introductions are made via email. If you're looking for a warm introduction, you want to make it as easy as possible for the intermediary to tell your story. For more on what makes a memorable story, refer to the Tell Your Story video I covered earlier in the course. Second, build an angel list profile, which allows investors to learn about you and you about them. Creating a profile about who you are and what you do makes it easy for investors interested in your type of business to find you. Then when people follow either your personal profile or your company, send them a personal note. Third, create a list of investors you'd like to meet with. Angel lists can be helpful in finding investors interested in your industry. After you eliminate people who are invested in your competitors, you'll probably have a list of 40 to 50 investors to reach out to. Build a spreadsheet and then start coming up with a plan for reaching out. Fourth, scan your networks. While it's possible that you already know potential investors, you probably don't. Cultivating intermediaries, individuals who can introduce you to potential investors, can be vital. For me, as a professional investor, when someone I know and trust suggests I look at a company, I am far more likely to take a look than if I'm cold called. I suspect this is true for all investors. Rarely, if ever, do they invest in someone who has reached out without an introduction. Also, be sure to understand what a warm introduction is. If you are asking someone you don't know well or who's not excited about your company to put their reputation on the line for you, rather than a warm introduction, you're likely to get a cold shoulder. Fifth, do your homework. A good example of entrepreneurs doing the homework to know their audience is a reality show in the US called Shark Tank. Before you walk into a meeting, you want to know about prospective investors. You usually can find the basics of what you need to know on LinkedIn. Tailor your pitch to what interests your audience and highlight aspects of your company that will most intrigue and excite the investor. You will want to tell a story in 15 minutes or less, with the pitch deck providing the backup data to your oral narrative. And practice, practice, practice. This is the speech of a lifetime. Sixth, focus on storytelling. Start with a grabber and talk about the progress your company is already making by saying something like, "We grew 150% in sales in 5 weeks." Note how this allows you to tell a story while underscoring your fluency with the numbers. Then, move to the problem you are solving and why this matters to you and how you and your team can solve it. You'll also want to know your competitors, why you have a competitive advantage and your exit strategy, or how they're going to actually get a return on their investment. I cannot overemphasize how important knowing your numbers is. Not how big the market is, they can look that up, but the actual economics of your business as per our discussion in the video on your financial model. Finally, you'll want to say how much money you're raising, the current valuation if there is one, and be specific about what you will do with the money. If you decide to take on outside investors, you'll want to prepare. There is no better way to destroy your company and your sanity than taking money from someone without having clear rules of engagement. And this begins with you deciding what your company is worth. If your business is already established, you own a restaurant, for example, taking in outside investors can be relatively straightforward. To get a feel for valuations in this context, take a look at online marketplaces like BizQuest and BuyBizSell, where you'll see the restaurant generating $50,000 in cash per year after expenses and taxes would be valued between $100,000 to $150,000, or 2 to 3 times cash flow. There are a variety of factors that increase or decrease what an investor will pay for a stake in your business, like location, but this will provide you with a starting point. Valuations become much more complicated and subjective if your company doesn't yet have revenue. How then do you place a value on your company? The first thing you have to come to grips with is that your business is only worth what an investor is willing to pay. However, if you believe you have a high growth business, one that can grow to $20 million in 5 years, there are some well accepted methods for determining valuation. One is the Berkus method, which provides you with an initial approximation. Here's how it works. Number one, if you could convince an investor you have a sound idea, you may be worth up to $500,000. It could be less, but $500,000 is the maximum. Two, if you have a prototype which reduces technology risk, add up to another $500,000. Three, if you have a quality management team which reduces execution risk, add another $500,000. Four, if there are strategic relationships which reduce market and competitive risk, add another $500,000. Because these are maximums, your value will be at most $2 million. Again, it will be up to you to persuade an investor to buy into your valuation. A slightly more complicated method of determining valuation for high-growth companies is Bill Payne's scorecard methodology. This methodology starts with a baseline number of $1.5 million and then adjusts the valuation up or down based on a subjective appraisal of the management team, size of the opportunity, and competition. In the exercise files, I've included a detailed white paper by Payne on this topic. Once you've come up with a valuation for your company based on your business as it is today, I'd also take a look at the VC or venture capital method devised by Bill Salmon. This starts with the terminal value, or what you could sell your company for in 5 years. A simple way to calculate the terminal value is to start with what you estimate revenue will be in year 5. Given that you're building a high-growth business, let's start with $20 million. Let's also assume that you can sell your business for 2 times revenue, which is often the case for software companies. Then your terminal value would be $40 million. The next step is to divide the $40 million terminal value by the return an investor will require. Because early-stage investing is very risky, an investor will expect at least a 20 times return on their money. Your post-money valuation, or the value of your company after you have raised money, is then equal to terminal value divided by anticipated return, or $40 million divided by 20 equals $2 million. Your last step is to solve for your pre-money valuation. This is based on how much cash you need to get to your next major milestone, which is typically about 18 months out. If that amount is $500,000, then your pre-money valuation is $1.5 million. Determining the value of your company when you're pre-revenue is definitely more art than science. But if you do your homework and consider these 3 valuation methods, you will be able to triangulate on a reasonable starting point. And then you can let the negotiations begin. You've identified people who are interested in investing in you and your company. Now it's time to establish rules of engagement. As a first step, there will be a term sheet. This is a non-binding document that outlines the terms of your deal. It will include how much of the company the investor will own and at what price, how much stock needs to be set aside to attract talent, what kind of rights the investor has if the company is sold, who will be on the board of directors, and when the deal closes. In evaluating this term sheet, you will want to build a capitalization table. This is a spreadsheet that shows how much each person owns of the company. As you negotiate, you'll want to keep in mind the investor's perspective. Your first outside investment will probably come from an angel investor, a high net worth individual, who is putting their personal capital at risk, usually in the amount of $25,000 to $100,000, and typically wants to own 10 to 20% of the company. This will have you circling back to valuation. You need to have done the work to value your company. If you know you need $100,000 to get to your next major milestone, and the investor wants to own 20%, then your pre-money valuation is $400,000. Post-money, $500,000. Again, valuation is more art than science. Note, too, that the principal factor affecting real valuation is the investor's liquidation preferences, meaning what happens if you sell a company. Investors will typically own preferred stock, while you as the entrepreneur own common. If the company gets liquidated, the preferred stock has priority. A standard term is that preferred stockholders get one time or all of their money back before the common holders get anything, after which the spoils tend to be equally divided. You'll also want to be aware that control of the company is driven by the terms of the investment documents, not just ownership. Investors can negotiate veto rights over later financings or a sale of the company, for example, no matter how much they own. It's important not to negotiate every term. Know what is standard, then choose your issues. As investors are conducting due diligence on you, you want to conduct due diligence on them. Does the investor understand your business, your industry? Do they have enough money so that if you need to raise more capital, they can participate? How has this investor interacted with other entrepreneurs? If you're talking to venture capitalists, you may want to check funded.com, a site where entrepreneurs actually rate VCs. Consider, too, the advice of my friend, startup attorney Ellen Cornsweet. When you as the founder negotiate a term sheet, you are negotiating on behalf of the company, not yourself. You need a lawyer for the company and for you, which brings me to my final point. No matter how good you are at negotiating, get an experienced lawyer, one that's been referred to you. It is invaluable. When you bring on an investor, you are bringing on a partner. But no matter how invested they are in you and your business, you will need to negotiate your rules of engagement. Walk into a negotiation expecting to get and willing to give, and your partnership will pay off.
JP Morgan is right now the biggest bank in the United States, probably the history of the United States.
JP Morgan.
Over the last century, of the notable bank mergers that have taken place, JP Morgan and its predecessors have been involved in almost 1/4.
It's the largest bank in America. America. More than $2 trillion in assets.
Right now, the biggest bank in the United States, probably in the history of the United States.
JP Morgan.
Over the last century, of the notable bank mergers that have taken place, JP Morgan and its predecessors have been involved in almost 1/4.
It's the largest bank in America. More than $2 trillion in assets.
Right now, they're also the biggest bank in the world by market capitalization.
From the panic of 1907 to 2007, the subprime mortgage crisis and the financial collapse thereafter, JP Morgan Chase has been at the center of American banking for over a century. The company has an unabashed CEO, not afraid to speak his mind.
He weighs in on politics on a pretty frequent basis.
I was also the president that two of his advisors told him, I'm not going to name them, but they told him there would be no retaliation. We said there absolutely will be, and they were wrong.
This man is a criminal. Probably the most notable banker of the past 25 years.
The company helps finance the largest economy on earth. And even after millions were hit by the Great Recession, JP Morgan came out bigger and stronger. That's likely just how JP Morgan himself would have done it. So let's start at the beginning. The man behind the empire, JP Morgan, was born John Pierpont in 1837 to a prominent New England family. After traveling Europe, Morgan returned home to launch his financial career.
His father was in many ways the most important person in his life. And his father, Junius, was a very straight shooter, very moral, very convinced that in the high-risk, high-stakes business of investment banking, your word is your bond, your reputation is everything.
In 1871, JP Morgan, along with the help of a former banker, Anthony Drexel, created a private merchant partnership called Drexel, Morgan & Company. It later became JP Morgan & Co.
The U.S. was the emerging economy in the 19th century, in the middle of the 19th century, booming, busting, just going through all the growth patterns of what was becoming a major industrial economy. What they were doing was funneling investments from Europe to these American companies, not putting their own capital into the railroads. A little bit they did. When Morgan died, he had very minor investments in the companies that he had brokered.
Morgan became heavily involved in reorganizing and consolidating railroads.
If a railroad manager was suddenly playing fast and loose, cheating his investors, really getting his company into trouble, Pierpont Morgan would step in and fire the managers, hire new ones. Morgan was trying to monitor and discipline the companies who had sold securities to his clients.
Morgan's next target, the steel industry.
Andrew Carnegie had built the best steel company in the world. He figured out about economies of scale. He was able to outproduce and underprice all of his competitors. Morgan decided in 1901 that essentially he would do for the steel industry what he'd done for the railroad industry, which was consolidate a lot of smaller companies into one giant. And he put together U.S. Steel, capitalized at $1 billion in 1901. That was an unheard of sum for that time. And people were staggered, were horrified, were skeptical. He did revolutionize the financial markets.
And it wasn't only railroads and steel. JP Morgan was influential in creating what would later become AT&T. And he helped finance America's electrification.
His own house was the first private house ever illuminated entirely by electricity. His own private study caught on fire the couple of days after they installed the system, and he said, "Do it again, I'm not giving up." Morgan combined Edison Electric with one of his chief rivals, and that became General Electric in 1892.
Morgan was not without controversy.
What he was doing was very good for lenders from Europe, for wealthy people who had money to invest. It was very good for the growing American economy overall. It was not good for farmers and small businessmen who had to borrow money. He was basically keeping the dollar really strong, but it cost them more to pay back their loans than what they had borrowed, and that was really painful. And there was a huge populist opposition to Morgan. It was very controversial and continued to be controversial.
Then came the panic of 1907. It's regarded as the first worldwide financial crisis to hit the modern world.
The American economy was growing so fast and with so little supervision, so little government regulation, so few people who really knew how to govern it. There was a panic or a devastating crash and depression just about every 10 years.
Despite reporting strong corporate earnings, the stock market crashed and stocks plummeted on foreign exchanges. The U.S. government lacked the funds to stop the bleeding, and there was no central bank.
Morgan delegated two groups of men, one young lieutenants who would stay up all night and assess the health of these trust companies to see whether they were worth saving or had to be let go, and then two other senior bankers along with himself who would be making the top level decisions.
The group functioned as the country's unofficial central bank.
The New York Stock Exchange didn't have enough money to complete its trades, and the head of the exchange came across the street to Morgan and said, we're going to have to close before 3 o'clock because we can't keep the trades going. Morgan said, you can't do that. In this climate, it will make things so much worse. We've got to keep the stock exchange open. So he called several of the leading bankers to his office and said, we need $20 million in 20 minutes to send across the street to the stock exchange. And these guys, without flinching, put up that money. It's evidence of how much they trusted Morgan, that they knew he was the guy who could stop this and he wasn't going to do anything tricky with it. Later that week, New York City couldn't meet its payroll. It went on like this for 2 harrowing, terrible weeks. And finally, it began to subside. One of the headlines in the middle of this, something like, stocks stabilized for the moment and JP Morgan has a cold. He had a terrible cold. And he was, as some of this was going on, he was just sneezing and coughing and making calculations on a piece of paper, but it was just, he was totally exhausted and not young.
While Morgan was celebrated on Wall Street for saving the economy, people quickly realized that perhaps one banker shouldn't have so much power.
For about a minute after the end of the panic, Morgan was an international hero. But the minute after that, the idea of that much power residing with one private banker really was not okay.
It set in motion a number of financial reforms, including eventually the creation of the Federal Reserve. But Morgan never got to see the Fed. JP Morgan died on March 31st, 1913, in Rome. The New York Stock Exchange was closed until noon on the day he died to honor his memory. His son, JP Morgan Jr., took over, and the company continued to play a prominent role in financing major American projects. In 1915, the bank facilitated the largest foreign loan in history, $500 million to the English and the French to support their war effort during World War I. When the Depression-era Glass-Steagall Act of 1933 forced banks to split from investment banks, JP Morgan and Company was broken up. Grandson Henry Sturgis Morgan went on to found Morgan Stanley. But that is the history for only half of what became today's JP Morgan Chase. The other side has an interesting history, too, that goes back even further, to the 1700s. Aaron Burr, famous for winning a duel against Alexander Hamilton and exiled after being tried for treason, but he's also credited with creating the earliest predecessor to JP Morgan Chase. He founded the Manhattan Company in April 1799. It sought out a charter that would enable the company to supply purified water to New York City residents in an effort to stave off yellow fever. It also got a banking charter to take on Alexander Hamilton's Bank of New York. In fact, JP Morgan Chase, to this day, has the pistol that Aaron Burr used to shoot Alexander Hamilton. After a slew of mergers over 150 years, it became Chase Manhattan Bank in 1955. While JP Morgan and Company floundered as a major player in finance, another company emerged, Chemical Bank. What started as a chemical company in New York City in the 1800s became one of the foremost banks in the Northeast. In 1969, it created the first cash dispensing machine that was installed in the Rockville Center branch on Long Island. Now, we call these ATMs. And all of that brings us to the major banking consolidation of the 1990s that created the behemoth that is JP Morgan Chase today. The global economy, technology, and the rise of Wall Street's political power got Washington to change the rules.
Deregulation from the 1990s came in 2 parts. One would be national banking and the ability to have greater efficiency. I still remember, to take traveler's checks if you went from the East Coast to the West Coast. I mean, how inefficient was that?
Chemical Bank merged with Chase Manhattan in 1996.
Huge bank merger is in the news this morning. Chemical Bank and Chase Manhattan are joining forces to become the biggest banking company in the nation, with assets of nearly $300 billion.
Then, in 1999, the law that originally split up JP Morgan and Company in the 1930s was repealed.
Today, we proved that we could deal with the large issue facing our country and every other advanced economy in the world.
Now, the elimination of Glass-Steagall, that was much more controversial.
I believe this legislation in its current form will do more harm than good.
In 2000, Chase merged with JP Morgan to create the country's largest bank.
Chase had a very good brand name, but we think JP Morgan is a better brand name.
And that gave a little extra cachet. JP Morgan, a good brand name, long legacy. But despite the vision was to better compete against like Goldman Sachs and Morgan Stanley and Merrill Lynch. The banks, they were second tier.
Size didn't equal success in the early years.
I mean, these were big, bureaucratic, error-prone, lumbering giants.
But the consolidation didn't stop there. The company merged with Midwest giant Bank One in 2004.
It's the biggest financial deal to hit Wall Street in 6 years. JP Morgan buying Bank One for roughly $58 billion in stock.
We negotiated, and I think we did. It's going to be great for our shareholders.
JP Morgan, wow, look how far they've come. 5 of the 8 money center banks from the 1980s are in JP Morgan. In fact, over the last century, of the notable bank mergers that have taken place, JP Morgan and its predecessors have been involved in almost 1/4.
That set up Jamie Dimon to be the next CEO of the company.
To me, as a bank analyst who has covered the space for 3 decades, that was a defining moment. That was when JP Morgan and its legacy firms got a new religion. And at some point, the platitudes got pretty heavy. I mean, fortress balance sheet this and fortress balance sheet that. And, he's a fast talker. And a lot of good signs from Jamie Dimon, but there's also a degree of, okay, the jury is out on this leader, Jamie Dimon.
While there are lots of external factors we cannot control, we must expect increasing tough competition around the world.
I would say a defining moment also happened during the financial crisis, and that would be the acquisition of Bear Stearns.
The firm that I keep hearing that's most likely to buy it will be JP Morgan Chase, obviously helping with the bank, helping with the financing, the bailout.
And that showed the value of having a fortress balance sheet. It showed the value of having strength when others are weak.
Just like 100 years before, JP Morgan had to grapple with the collapsing financial system.
I called up my whole operating committee. I told them we're about to have a catastrophe take place. All hands on deck the next day. I think I called my board that Saturday and said, we have a national emergency.
And when you told them how bad it could get, what did you tell them?
You're going to see the worst week ever in America in financial history since the Great Depression, that in my opinion, Lehman's going to go bankrupt, that AIG is a possibility, and that it might be a domino effect after that.
But the company kept playing a role as a buyer.
JP Morgan Chase followed up with the acquisition of WAMU.
And the company emerged from the crisis stronger.
If you made one move more than any other, if you were investing in bank stocks since 2004, it should have been to own JP Morgan Chase as an investment. Since the Bank One merger for the last 15 years, JP Morgan Chase has outperformed the bank stock index by an average of 600 percentage points each year. That's tremendous outperformance versus the banks.
Despite the company's relative strength, Dimon was called in front of Congress to defend the bank's actions after the industry received more than $700 billion in government bailout money.
The question that I nor anyone will ever be able to answer is what would have happened had that not been injected, when and how it was injected.
He even called for more systemic regulation.
I think it would be a tremendous benefit to have one regulator looking at anything that can cause systematic risk.
Well, I would make a distinction between regulation and red tape. So thank you, regulators, for making the banking industry stronger than it's been in a few decades. And they've done it with very clear rules. Okay, you won't have as much leverage, which means more capital, and capital protects banks from unexpected problems during tough times.
But it hasn't always been completely smooth sailing for Dimon at the helm of JP Morgan.
The annual shareholder letter from JP Morgan Chase CEO Jamie Dimon, it addresses the London Whale issue right off the bat. He says it was an extremely embarrassing episode, the most embarrassing episode that he has ever dealt with, and it also cost the firm money.
The company lost more than $6 billion on the trade, and Dimon was marched in front of Congress again.
This man is a criminal when the small businesses can't get the same loans, when the people are deprived loans to get into their houses.
Well, I went to the annual meeting after JP Morgan had the London Whale incident. It was down in Tampa, Florida, and I went to ask questions of the lead director to find out how much the board was overseeing Jamie Dimon and the rest of the management team. So it was certainly an issue. And JP Morgan Chase said, we still earn money that quarter. Yeah, that's kind of like, okay, you're texting while driving. Never do that. You hit the guardrail and you cause $500 worth of damage to your car. See, it was only $500. No, the point is you could have gone off the edge and killed a few people. Okay, it could have been much greater damage than it was.
And in 2013, JP Morgan settled with the Department of Justice. The charges were that the company overstated the quality of mortgages it sold to investors in the run-up to the financial crisis. It cost the company $13 billion. Overall, JP Morgan Chase has settled more than a dozen government cases and private lawsuits in connection with the financial crisis. That's according to a CNBC analysis of KBW's litigation tracker. Some of the settlements were liabilities from the Bear Stearns and WAMU acquisitions. In total, though, they've cost the company more than $30 billion. While there still is some outstanding litigation, for the most part, the company has put the crisis behind it.
JP Morgan Chase has gained market share. It now ranks #1 in global investment banking and trading activity. That's from a second and third class status a couple decades ago. Now they're #1. On the retail side, JP Morgan Chase, especially Chase, the retail brand name, they rank #1, 2, or 3 in most categories, and they rank #1 in digital banking, an area of tremendous growth. So now you look at it, and for the last 10 years, despite flat market share, JP Morgan has improved its deposit market share nationally from 7% to over 10%. Who's using JP Morgan Chase more than ever before? Young people, millennials.
They're taking all these processes that used to be very paper heavy or very sort of people heavy, like you had to go to a branch, and they're turning that to digital, and they're putting it so that if you wanted to apply for a mortgage, you could do it through your mobile phone. If you wanted to trade stocks easily and for free, you could do it through the mobile phone. They also have something called Sapphire Reserve. It's a hugely popular credit card that they rolled out in 2016. Tons of millennials have bought into that, primarily because they get extra points, reward points, for things like dining out and travel, things that millennials supposedly like to do a lot. This is a play to get people relatively early on in their financial lives.
I mean, do you think millennials wake up and say, oh, we want to do business with a big institution, a big bank? That's not the thought process. The thought process is, hey, they have better digital banking, they have better online banking, they make our lives easier. Let's go to JP Morgan Chase. You're seeing this at some other banks too, but JP Morgan Chase certainly is a leader in that category.
And what would JP Morgan think of the company bearing his name being back at the top of banking?
I think that was perfectly appropriate.